Alright, so the rule to remember here when you're dividing is what can't you have in the denominator? Radicals. So no radicals in the denominator. Alright, so for example, alright, so there's two ways to do it, depending on what you want to do. You could go ahead and simplify the two radicals, because if they have a common factor, you could go ahead and do that. Or you can do, what could I do to get rid of this radical 20 on bottom? Multiply top and bottom by radical 20. So you could do it either way. I'll do it both ways, and then we'll look at it. So if I wanted to cancel a common factor, what is 15 and 20, what do they have in common? 5. So this would become a 3, and this would become a 4. Okay, but what is the square root of 4? 2. So what does your denominator become? 10. So that would get rid of your need to multiply top and bottom by radical 20. So that's probably the easiest way. If we'd have multiplied top and bottom by radical 20, you would have had like radical 300 over, so that would be 20 times 100. And so 300 would have simplified to 10 radical 3. And then 10 and 100 simplify to radical 3 over 10. So you can get the same answer, it's just depending on which way you do it. Okay, so let's go to number 3, which is right below it. Okay. So let's do the common factor way, since these have radicals on top and bottom. What is the common factor with radical 6 and radical 27? 3. So if I divide those both by 3, I get radical 2 on top, and on bottom I would get radical 9. What is the square root of 9? 3. Alright, so that simplifies to radical 2 over 3, and so then you would be done. Since you don't have a radical on bottom and radical 2 doesn't simplify, you wouldn't have to do anything else. Okay. Then let's go to number 5. Alright, so at number 5 there is no radical on top, so there's nothing I can do there. So what do I have to do to get rid of that radical 5 on bottom? Multiply top and bottom by radical 5. And if you can do that in your head, you don't have to show that step. So that would be 4 radical 5 over 5. You do want to make sure you check to see if the things that are now outside the radical would simplify. You would go ahead and simplify them if they had a common factor. But since they don't, then that's all you have to do. Alright, why don't you guys try number 7, and then we'll check it. It's radical 5 over radical 3. So what'd you guys get for that? Yes, radical 15 over 2. Radical 15 doesn't simplify, and you can't divide things outside the radical into things inside the radical. So that would be all you could do. Get number 9. Okay. If I were you, I would go ahead and simplify under radical part. So the 3 and the 5 won't simplify, but what about the x squared and the x?
When did you take the x out?
Yeah, so this x would cancel, and so you'd leave with 1x on top. And then what happens to your y cubes? Cancel out. So you have radical 3x over 4 radical 5. Pretty good? And then what would you do to simplify that? Multiply top and bottom by radical 5. On top, what would you get? Good. Now bottom, 20. Okay. Alright, let's look at number 11. So, if you have addition or subtraction on top, you cannot cancel. So like I couldn't cancel my a out from both of those because you would have to have the factor would have to be over here as well if you're going to cancel. So if I were you, if you have addition or subtraction on top, I wouldn't try to cancel out until the end, if it will. So just get rid of the radical on bottom. What would we do? Okay, multiply top and bottom by radical 8a. So when you do the top, you have to distribute that radical 8a to both factors on top. So what's radical 8a times 3? So I multiply it all the way over here. 3 radical 8a minus, and then what do you get when you multiply 3 radical 3a times radical 8a?
3 radical 24a squared.
And then on bottom, what do I get?
32a.
Okay, so now look at the top. Can you simplify either of those radicals?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, so the 24, what would you make it into?
2, 6, and 8 squared.
Alright, so I can take the square root of the 4 and the a squared, so a 2a would come out of the radical. So I have 3 radical 8a minus what?
6a radical 6.
All over 32a. The only thing you could do is if all 3 of these numbers, if they all 3 had a common factor, you could simplify that, but they do not. So that would be your final answer. So it gets more time consuming and complicated as we go. Okay, why don't you guys try the next one then? Number
And we
13.
don't simplify the 8A. The radical.
Radical 4, radical 2, radical
Did I do that wrong? Sorry. What did I do?
You just didn't simplify the
Eight.
radical.
Oh, thank you. What's this? Alright. That would be 4 and 2, my fault. And the A, I can't do anything with. Alright, so that would come out and be a 2. So 6 radical 2A minus 6A radical 6 all over 32A. Alright, did I do that right now?
Yeah.
Okay, now look at all three of those numbers. Do all three of those numbers have a common factor? Yes. They're all divisible by 2. This would be a 3, this would be a 3A, and this would be 16A. So, final answer would be 3 radical 2A minus 3A radical 6 all over 16A. Alright, is that right? Okay, sorry about that. Okay, now you guys can try the next one. Okay, simplify that and see what you get. Did you guys get an answer? What is it?
I don't want to say it, so I'm scared.
I got 4x to the third radical 3 minus 9 radical x over 9x.
That's right, good. Okay. So, multiply top and bottom by radical 3. Guess you could simplify this on bottom first. Bring the x out, so it would be 3x radical 3. Then you would only have to multiply top and bottom by radical 3. Might help a little bit. So on top, I would have 4x cubed radical 3 minus, if you take radical 3x times radical 3, you get radical 9x. So the 9 you can take the square root of, and so that would be 9 radical x. And then on bottom, you would get 9x. Yeah. All right. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, let's skip down to, well, let's do 15. You might want to put a star by this one. 80% of you will do this wrong when we test over it for some reason. I'm not sure why. Okay. When you have addition or subtraction on bottom, you have to multiply top and bottom by what's called the conjugate. And with the conjugate, you have everything's the same, but you just change the operation between the two things. So if it is addition like ours is, we change it to subtraction. So instead of multiplying top and bottom by 4 plus 4 radical 5, we have to multiply top and bottom by 4 minus 4 radical 5. Okay, and that's the only way to do it. So on top, we would just distribute the 3. So if I distribute the 3, what do I get? Alright, so let's see what happens on bottom. When you multiply by the conjugate, there's a purpose for changing the sign. So you have to FOIL these two together. Alright, so if I FOIL, I take 4 times 4 is 16. When I do outer, what's 4 times a negative 4 radical 5? Alright, and then inner is 4 times 4 radical 5.
16.
And then last is minus
16, well, 80.
80. Yeah, 16 times 5, which would be 80. Alright, so what happens to the two things in the middle?
Yes.
They cancel. That's the purpose of the conjugate. Changing the sign is the only way to get that to happen. If one is plus and one is minus, then these two in the middle will cancel, which gets rid of the radical that was our issue in the beginning. So then I just have, what's 16 minus 80?
Negative 64.
Negative 64. So on top I have 12 minus 12 radical 5. On bottom I have a negative 64. Do all 3 of these have a common factor? Okay, 4. And when you have a negative on bottom, you want to get rid of it. So you actually want to divide everything by a negative 4. So if I divide everything by -4, it'll change the 2 on top and change that to a positive. Alright, so on top I would have -3 plus 3 radical 5. And on bottom I would have a positive 16. And so that would be your final answer. Alright, let's have you try one of those. How about 21? Okay, so what is the conjugate of 4 minus radical 5?
4 plus radical 5.
4 plus radical 5. Alright, so you're going to top and bottom, and this time you'll have to FOIL on top as well. Alright, anybody want to volunteer your answer for that one? Else?
7 radical 5 plus 17 over 11.
That's right. Anybody else get that? So, if you do the conjugate, you're on your FOIL, you really only have to do first and last on bottom anyway, because you know your outer and your inner will cancel. So on bottom, it should have been 16 minus 5, which is how you got the 11. Then on top, when you FOILed those together, you would have had 4 radical 5 and plus 5 plus 12 plus 3 radical 5. So that's where you get the 7 radical 5 and the 17. Alright, good. Okay, so on the worksheet, you're going to do 1 through 22 all. So just do the ones we didn't do together.